I want to lead this episode off talking about the team that you believe might be in the best position to get back on track. Last season went a little bit awry. How will they find a way to get back into form? What team do you point at in that way?
So honestly, I mean, I know we're going to talk about a couple of teams, so this is one that I wanted to talk about off the bat. I think the Commanders are a team that's going to be able to get back on track this offseason because obviously Jaden Daniels was such a huge get for them, and he was such a revelation as a rookie. And then last year, it seemed like everything that could go wrong for them did go wrong. Now I understand in 2023, I'm sorry, 2024, they had a lot of uh, one score game luck, right? They beat the Bears on a Hail Mary, they beat the Cowboys on a late touchdown. They kind of just found ways to win, like random ways to win. And so in 2025, we knew that there was going to be some regression in that aspect. Add to the fact that Jane Daniels got hurt, and obviously you had a nightmare season for the Commanders. But with this offseason, with David Blau coming in, I think they're going to run more of a traditional offense. That was one of my gripes with Cliff Kingsbury, right? Was that it was kind of a gimmicky offense. It's kind of a Big 12 offense. We talked last episode about how important under center and how the people have now been deploying 13 personnel. I think the Commanders are going to go back to running a more pro style offense, obviously, and this will be Jane Daniels' first time doing that. I think that's going to lead to a lot more success. I also heard that David Blau talked about wanting to feature Terry McLaurin, like making that a point of the offense. So I think that they have. I like the direction that they're going with offense coordinator. Jane Daniels obviously is coming back. He was sensational as a rookie. Now I do have my concerns still with their defense, obviously, and obviously their offensive line isn't fantastic. But I think that they have enough together to bounce back this year and be closer to the team that they were in 2024. Not so much kind of the nightmare fuel that they were last year.
What's nice is that they probably should be getting younger. I'm looking at the free agents right now. Losing Debo Samuel, very
Yeah.
likely losing Debo
Yep.
Samuel.
He's probably going
Bobby
back to San Fran,
Wagner,
honestly.
yeah, Bobby Wagner coming up on 36 years old.
Mm.
He's going to be a free agent potentially. Zach Ertz going to be a free agent. Von Miller going to be a free agent. On one hand, you say, okay, cool, they're getting younger. On the other hand, though, experience is valuable. We know Dan Quinn values that a lot.
Hmm.
How many of these guys do you expect to be returning in that sense?
Probably not a lot, and I think maybe that's a good thing. I think maybe a youth movement would serve Washington well. Um, I think again they are going to obviously get some reinforcements in the draft. I do think that they're going to get some reinforcements from free agency. But I mean, and I love him. He's my guy. He's the Walter Perry Man of the Year. Was Bobby Wagner really a needle mover in the year of our Lord 2026? Is Zach Ertz? And Zach Ertz actually was better than a lot of people give him credit for. But I think that this is an opportunity for him to get younger, and this is an opportunity for Jaden Daniels to, again, like I said, grow in that kind of pro style of offense. I think they have some good players that haven't gotten opportunities that have been blocked by veterans that maybe we'll see now. Again, their defense to me still a little scary, but I'd like to
Well,
see
they
guys
have
like
66 million in cap space.
what?
They have $66 million in
Exactly,
cap.
exactly. Like I
So
said,
they could rebuild that. They
they have
could be
money.
potentially the Trey Hendrickson team.
Yeah, yeah.
They very well could. They could be the Max Crosby team
Mm-hmm.
if they
Oh,
wanna be.
oh,
I could
oh
see that.
gosh. I don't know who the Max Crosby team is. I don't know if it's Washington though. Although you never know. You never know.
It's an idea to float around,
Yeah.
right? If they really wanna commit to winning right now, which they are in a weird spot, they could take 'em multiple different directions, right? Because they were just in the NFC Championship 2 years ago, do
Hmm.
they look at that and say, "Oh, yeah, our quarterback was hurt last year, it doesn't really count. We still think we're contenders?" Or
Right.
do they look and say, "Let's take a little bit more of the youth movement here?" I don't really think there's a wrong answer. I think you could really do either, and there's valid reason to do it. But whatever they do, they have to commit to it. There's
Yeah.
no that you can't really dance around that issue, right?
Yeah. I think you can gaslight yourselves if you're Washington and you're Adam Peters into saying, "Hey, our season was lost because our quarterback was banged up." I think that's a kind of fairly reasonable, thought process. Not to say that you're a perfect team to begin with. Like I said, there was some luck involved with 2024, but a lot of the reason why I feel like Washington can step up to the plate once again is because of Jaden Daniels. If he can capture what he did in 2024, I feel like they're in a fine spot, obviously with some additional reinforcements. So they are a team that would be my first team that I think could really rebound in 2026.
So I'm with you. I think that is a team. I think they'll at least find their direction
Hmm.
this year. as to whether or not that's rebuilding or kind of just going with the youth movement, or maybe they'll commit to contending, go for a Crosby, go for a Trey Hendrickson. I don't know. But one that I want to float by you here, and I feel like they're kind of the forgotten team considering how interesting their story was early in the year. The Colts, this was a team that lost 8 of their last 9 at the end of last season. And I'm not going to act like this is a team that will have a flashy offseason. They probably won't. They have to re-sign Daniel Jones. They have to probably re-sign Alec Pierce. I think they're going to try and do that. If not, you definitely got to sign Quiddy Pay. So those are 3 guys that are probably going to be a decent chunk of change, and you need to make sure you keep them around, right? They're not too far from the salary cap, so they have to kind of make things work in that way. But assuming that they at least keep Daniel Jones around, they're just healthier, and that makes the difference, right? At the end of last year, considering how many games they were losing, they looked like one of the worst teams in football. They did because of the games that they were losing. However, them being healthier, Daniel Jones being healthier here, they should be maybe not the team they were at the start of the year, but they should be closer to the middle of the pack, without a doubt. I have no doubts about that because Daniel Jones and that offense, with Jonathan Taylor and the offensive line, they were a machine. They were a machine. They were stupendous. And it's not like there's guys who expect to really take a step back. At least I don't. I don't really see them losing anyone too important here unless they let Daniel Jones walk, right? I think Quiddy Pay, like I said, is an important player. I think Alec Pierce plays an important role, but you could afford to lose one of those two, Quiddy Pay or Alec Pierce. Maybe you're able to keep both of them around. Then you have the same team as last year. And the team we saw at the end of last year wasn't really playing up to the potential that this team has. We saw that earlier in the year. I really don't have doubts about the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not saying they'll be that same team from early this season, but I do think that they could go back to being a very competitive football team. And I think people are kind of underselling and not giving enough credit to how good this Colts team was early last year, especially with Sauce Gardner. Now that
Yeah, I think that's another thing people forget is that like they traded 2 first rounders for Sauce Gardner. Like this is a team that was gearing up for a big playoff run, and then their season kind of just evaporated into pixie dust, right at like the midpoint of the year. I don't think the Colts. I think the Colts, you're right, are being slept on a little bit because obviously we have to see what the long-term ramifications are for Daniel Jones and his Achilles injury. That is something that is certainly something to monitor. But in the interim, I mean, do we think that Riley Leonard or Anthony Richardson could
Anthony
scale him
Richardson isn't staying healthy either, man.
scale him up? Just let me
Let's stop
live in
with the
my
focus.
Anthony
Come on.
Richardson fantasy, dude. Please. I had it last year, and then he popped his eye socket on an exercise band or whatever he did. Like that was ridiculous. But no, I mean, we think of the Colts. I think of them as a well-run team, well coached by Shane Steichen. This is a team, like you said, in the first 9 weeks of the year that was like, wow, this is like one of the best teams in the NFL. And then Daniel Jones broke his leg, and then he tore his Achilles, and then Sauce Gardner never really played, and then Philip Rivers comes out of retirement and like low key almost beat the Seahawks, which was like so weird looking back at that. The fact that those are the champs, and he had him. Jason Myers had to kick like a 57-yarder to beat him. Um, so that was just bizarre. But anyways, no, I agree with you. The problem for me though with the Colts is twofold. Number one, they don't have their first round pick. Number two, I don't know if Alec Pierce. I think he is going to get a bag in free agency, and I don't know if they're able to re-sign him. And he was a huge part of their offense last year. Like he was such a field stretcher for them. He
Yeah.
was such a big play explosive guy. Without him, and then with trading Ad Mitchell to the Jets, who I've always really liked, I think that they are a little bit weapon deficient. And again, don't have that first round pick. So to me, I want to see what they do in the receiver market. I want to see kind of how they get some speed back into that receiver room, whether it's re-signing Alec Pierce or it's going out. Maybe it's getting a Romeo Dobbs. Maybe it's getting Juwan Jennings. I know I said speed and then I said Juwan Jennings. That doesn't really work well together. But for the Colts, I think that you're right. Like they can bounce back, but I think Chris Ballard's going to have a good offseason in order for me to have a lot of faith in them. My next team that I think really has a chance to come back, and I think that this is like, stealing candy from a baby. This is like, low hanging fruit. it's Detroit. I really do think Detroit has a good opportunity to get back to it. I mean, this is a team. They went 9-8 last year. They missed the playoffs largely because of how good the NFC was. And it was just kind of little things, right? It was their offense was still really, really good. Their defense obviously wasn't as good with the loss of oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on Aaron Glenn, totally blanking on his name. But they were just kind of a lesser version of what they have been in the past. They weren't quite as good in a few areas, and obviously the loss of Ben Johnson was not only huge for the Bears, but it was a big loss for the Lions. To me, this is a team that hasn't lost any of their core. Right, Jameer Gibbs is still there. Jared Goff is still playing good quarterback. Aiden Hutchinson. Last year, they dealt with so many injuries, as I feel like we talk about every year with the Lions, but they just dealt with so many injuries. I think a good offseason from Brad Holmes, who quietly, has kind of not done as well the last couple of years, right? He needs to get back on the saddle a little bit. A good offseason by Brad Holmes, and I think this Detroit team is right back to the contending portion of the NFC. I look at kind of some of the teams that they played last year. Like, they had no problem with the Bears. Like, they handled them twice. And actually, in Week 18, it was a game where the Lions had no incentive to win, really, and the Bears did have incentive to win to try to secure the number 2 seed. They handled the Bears. They handled them earlier in the year. This is a team. They now have a new offensive coordinator in Drew Petzing. You know, I know he's a bit divisive and he brings some mixed opinions. Personally, I think that he's probably an upgrade over what Morton was last year. So I can see their offense improving. And like I said, I think this roster is still, I wouldn't say stacked, because I think there are some holes, especially now with some offensive line question marks, like if Taylor Decker is going to be released slash retired, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but to me, this is a Lions team that has a big opportunity to get back. I thought they were a fearsome threat all year. Obviously, they just kind of missed the cut here, missed the cut there. They kind of lost on the margins, I thought, last year. And I could see this team coming back to being a real threat in the NFC.
Yeah, I'm looking at the free agents for this upcoming off season. Now, it is worth mentioning that this Lions team is over the cap,
Yep.
10 million over.
Yep.
But it's not like they have many key guys that they're
No.
losing, right? DJ Reader is important, although honestly, he hasn't really lived up to his contract. I don't
No,
think.
he hasn't.
I don't think he has. Now, Lee McNeil has developed into a solid guy. You could let Reader walk. You definitely could, especially, they just drafted Tyleik Williams.
Hmm.
So you let Tyleik Williams fill in for him. You feel good letting Reader walk. Anzalone, I do think you need to keep him around, right? He is the guy for this defense that calls the shots. He is just a signal caller there. He is the general of their defensive unit. You want to keep him around, but I don't think he's going to be too expensive. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think he'll be too pricey.
No, I wouldn't think so. Although I don't know if you saw, he got in a little Twitter spat with the Lions admin today, so that was fun.
Oh, I did not see that. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it
maybe
was.
after that beef, you rely on someone
They
else
hi-
to step
they
up.
made like a highlight video of like all the past breakups they did for Valentine's Day yesterday for the breakups, and
Mhm.
he quote tweeted and was like, "Had 9 this year, not in the video at all. Other free agents are in it as well." I was like, "Oh dang, getting
Okay. Well,
spicy."
then maybe they go with maybe they re-sign Malcolm Rodriguez instead.
I was gonna say,
Uh,
where's Malcolm Rodriguez at, man? I
well,
haven't
he
seen him
he's
for like a
supposed to
few
be a free
years.
agent. I don't. I mean, if they let Anzalone walk, they probably go Rodriguez.
Yeah,
I think you have to re-sign him at that point.
yeah,
But I think one of those two are gonna stay, right?
oh
And
yeah,
then he plays that role opposite of Jack Campbell, right?
yeah.
But overall, it's not a free agent class where it's like, yeah, you have to really make sure you keep these guys around. You could let a lot of these players walk and feel fine.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of with you. Detroit's in a spot where they just have to play better football.
Yeah,
That's all it's going to take. And last year they had some, unlucky games.
right.
They did. There were games throughout the year where players didn't play their best football at the worst time
I
possible.
think about games like the Steelers, where it was
Yeah.
like one play here, one play there, and that's the difference between being 9-8 and sitting on the couch, and 10-7 and being in the playoffs. You know what I mean? It's just those little. I felt like they lost on the margins last year so often.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I don't think that happens again. I think the offensive coordinators are better. I'm with you in that sense. So, yeah, Detroit is definitely a team I look at. Now, really quickly, just one last one I do want to float around here, although it's kind of cheating because the team made the playoffs. But the Chargers have to bounce back, right? They have to. I mean, offensive line injuries were the story of their season. That is what killed them. Do we think Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater get hurt again? I highly doubt it. Right? I really highly doubt that. They have a way better offensive coordinator. I think the Mike McDonald and uh or Mike McDaniel, sorry. Mike McDaniel and Justin Herbert marriage can be awesome. I think that could be really, really fun. And, they bolster the interior offensive line a little bit. They have the cap space to do exactly that. This is probably the team that's going to bounce back, like the number one team. And I get it. They made the playoffs, but they didn't really look like they belong there. They're going to be so much better this year. I have no doubts about that whatsoever. I just want to throw that out there really quick because, I mean, this is the team I'm really watching all
Yeah,
offseason.
that's definitely cheating, but I also agree. Like, like offensively, I mean, there was a reason he got one MVP vote. Shout out Sam Monson. Justin Herbert was out there just trying to survive, and it was not at all a functional offense for parts of the year. I mean, they kind of duct taped it together. They made it work to a certain degree. Obviously, their defense was awesome, but I agree with you. With some additional health on the offensive line, they should be much better. My question for you is, how big is the subtraction of Jesse Minter, who now goes to Baltimore? Sneakily was going to be one of the teams that I thought of. I did think, picking Lamar and everything was a bit too easy. But how big is that subtraction? Is that equal or worse than the addition of Mike McDaniel on the offensive side? Like, do you kind of see maybe this Chargers defense that had been so good the last couple of years taking a couple steps back with the loss of Minter?
Is it bad? Maybe I have too much faith in Harbaugh here. I trust Chris O'Leary, who they brought in to replace him. He's not a guy that we know too much about. He's not someone with too much experience at the NFL level. He's kind of a wild card, but he's from that staff, right? He is from that staff. And so far, these McDonald guys on the defensive side have worked very well. This is the extension of the McDonald tree. I'm not saying he's going to be Jesse Minter per se, but there is talent on their defense. And I trust that he's going to be able to run the scheme at a good enough level for them to still be a good defensive unit. Maybe a little bit of a step back, probably, but I think that offense is going to be a lot better. So I think it doesn't even out. I think the offense is going to be way better, and the defense is just going to take like a minor step back, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I
the
can see
Chargers
that.
will be great.
I could
I
see
think
that.
they'll
I
be great.
think maybe, like you said, they're not as good defensively, but they're much better offensively. Um,
Yeah.
are we thinking this is a big year for Amarian Hampton? Are we thinking he's going to be a 1,000+ yard rusher, or do you think they're gonna say, listen, we've invested so heavily into our receiving room, Johnston, McConkey, Trey Harris obviously was making plays last year. Keenan Allen's still on the team. Are we going to be a passing offense, or are we going to kind of go back to classic Jim Harbaugh football and say we're going to run the rock? Sandra Bullock action. We're going to run the damn ball. What do you see for the vision for this offense?
I'll say this: if Omarion Hampton can run outside zone at a really high level, they're going to lean on it because that is what McDaniel likes to do. He loves the outside zone. If they can spam it, they will. But with a guy like Herbert, they're going to get him going. I have no worries about that. I think it's going to be a decently balanced approach, is what I will say.